2 Samuel chapter 15. I was reading this just recently in my devotions, and I was reading about David's life in this period. And some of the people that were associated with him and his family and the things that happened, if you were, and I trust no one does here, but I remember when I was a kid, women used to watch Days of Our Lives or whatever that was, as the world turns and, all that stuff. Soap operas. And, they're just, that's what they are. It's just all a dramatization of people's lives, right? And that's kind of how I thought of David and some of the situations that he found himself in, and some of the friends that he had were awful, and some of the friends that were associated with his sons were awful, and some of them were very good. But I thought, as I was reading this, I was reading about Ittai and Hushai. And they were two good friends. And I'll just start reading here in verse 21. David's on the run from Absalom. And we can start in verse 19. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite. Now, I believe that makes him a Philistine. If he's a Gittite, he's a stranger anyway. Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king. Talking about Absalom. For thou art a stranger and also in exile. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return thou and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. And this struck me here, verse 21. And at this point, David needed a friend because he didn't have many. Ittai answered the king and said, As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. That's a friend. And David said to Ittai, Go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men, and all the little ones that were with him. Let's pause for prayer. Our Father, we come before you and ask for your help tonight. Pray that we would preach in your power. Amen. So, think about what kind of friend you are. What kind of friend are you? Right? That's a good question. David had some other friends we're going to look at tonight. The first one I want to look at, and I've used the words that begin with S to describe these various friends, but and I've tried to fit them in, if that works. But anyway, the first one was the subtle friend. The subtle friend. Now, subtlety isn't always a bad thing, right? I like subtle humor. I don't always get it, but I kind of like subtle humor. But very often, subtlety is connotated with bad. In fact, the first time we see the word subtle in the Bible, it's associated with the devil, right? Now, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. And that his whole purpose in being subtle was to destroy, was to throw a wrench in things. And there are very often friends like that. They are subtle like the devil, and they like to play the devil's advocate. They seem to take pleasure or get joy from being that type of friend. They purport themselves to be a friend. And I think I was thinking about Jonadab. You can turn to 2 Samuel chapter 13, just a couple chapters back. Verse 1, and it came to pass after this, Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar, and Ammon, the son of David, loved her. So they're half-brothers. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend He had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. So he's David's nephew. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. If you continue to read the story here, he told Amnon how to get David's granddaughter, Tamar, Absalom's daughter. And I don't even know why. Why would he do it? I mean, we know that at this point David is experiencing the judgments of God upon him for his sin, his adultery with Bathsheba, and the murder of Bathsheba's husband. But it's still interesting to see how it plays out, how God works and moves and how things transpire. And it doesn't lessen who people are and what they do. It's just like Judas Iscariot. The Lord said, I go as it's written of me, but woe unto that man. It'd be good for him if he were never born, right? And you wonder about, it says he was a very subtle man, and here it's using that evil connotation, that bad connotation. And it seems that his whole purpose in life was just to disrupt things. And you know there are friends like that, and that's what it says here, but Amnon had a friend. He really wasn't a friend. And he would have been a family friend. He would have been a friend of the family because he was part of the family. And he's always the guy that takes pride and takes joy in throwing a wrench in the works, right? It just seems there are people like that. That's exactly what Satan did in his subtlety. There was peace in the garden. There was innocence in the garden. There was sweet fellowship with God in the garden. And Satan just couldn't have it. Satan, it's almost like misery loves company, you know that old saying? And so they're going to make everybody miserable. And they go about it in a very underhanded way. And that's exactly what he did. In a very underhanded way, he convinces Amnon, who's too consumed with his own lust, to see what Jonadab is doing. And he ends up raping his own sister, his half-sister. And Jonadab had convinced him. And then a little bit later, Absalom, in the same chapter, Absalom waits a couple years. And Absalom has it in for Amnon. And he invites all of his brethren over to a big feast. And Amnon goes over. And Absalom premeditatedly murdered, had Amnon murdered. And so they all flee. And Jonadab, it seems, had something to do with this. If you get down to verse 32 of the same chapter. And it says, verse 30, and it came to pass while they were in the way that tidings came to David, saying, Absalom hath slain all the king's sons, and there's not one of them left. Then the king arose and tare his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes rent. And Jonadab, same guy, the son of Shimea, David's brother, answered and said, let not my lord suppose that they have slain all the young men, the king's sons. I mean, this guy was supposedly Amnon's friend. And here he is in the presence of David now, and he is aware that Absalom only killed Amnon, which maybe he had something to do with it. He certainly was aware. For Amnon only is dead, for by the appointment of Absalom, this hath been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. He was the one, Amnon did what he did, so he was responsible. But the whole thing was engineered by Jonadab. The guy's a scumbag. He just seems to live for chaos and confusion. Right? Unfortunately, there are people like that. That's what they seem to thrive on, that sort of thing. You know, they maybe, who knows what the motivation was, but maybe, that he was bitter about his own position. Maybe he was bitter about his own life. Who knows? And he wasn't going to take joy in anybody else. In fact, he was going to wreck everything that he touched on purpose. Some kind of friend, huh? But Amnon had a friend. And then there's a social friend. And I thought Ahithophel. You know, Ahithophel was David's counselor. And to his face, he had to own David as king. Now, it's thought that Ahithophel was Bathsheba's father or grandfather. It's possible. We don't know for sure. But in the circles that they both frequented, the court of David, he had to be socially. This reminds me of Washington, D.C. I mean, this is the way it is. I actually think there's if you were in those circles behind the scenes, that it's all dog eat dog. They're all vying for position. And they would slit each other's throats if they thought they could get away with it to gain position. In fact, it came out the other day that both Biden and Harris's whole staff, they hate each other. Blaming each other. And this is kind of, you know, it's the, I'm going to smile to your face, but behind his back, Ahithophel was ready to kill David. In fact, he was using Absalom to accomplish apparently his own ends. Another friend. And David said that he was David's counselor. And he said, when Ahithophel speaks, it's like the voice of God. He was a wise man. And when Absalom came in, Ahithophel gave him counsel. He said, give me 12,000 men. He wanted to do it personally. Give me your choicest men. I'll go out. I'll find David, and I'll kill him. And I'll kill him alone, and I'll bring the other people back, and you'll be king. This was David's friend and counselor. That's 2 Samuel 15:12. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. And there came a messenger to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants, well, anyway, I had read, he finds out that Ahithophel, that it really bothered him that Ahithophel had gone after Absalom. It just cut him to the quick. The slandering friend, that was Ziba. All this stuff was exposed. This is all part of, all surrounding David. 2 Samuel 16:1, you remember Ziba? He was one of Saul's servants. And he became the servant of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son, and he was lame. And David said, he's going to eat meat continually at my table, and you're going to serve him. And this is 2 Samuel 16:1. When David was a little past the top of the hill, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of asses saddled, and upon them 200 loaves of bread. You think, well, that's good. And 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. And the king said unto Ziba, what meanest thou by these? Even he questions it. Why are you bringing all this stuff, Ziba? And Ziba said, the asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine that such as be faint in the wilderness may drink. And the king said, and where is thy master's son? And here it is. This is the lie. And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he abideth at Jerusalem, for he said, today shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father. Then said the king to Ziba, behold, thine are all that pertained unto Mephibosheth. And Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, my lord, O king. Well, that was a slander. That wasn't true. You know, I've always read that. You know, whenever I read that, I thought, if David had used his brain a little bit, he would have seen that even Ziba saying that didn't even make any sense. Why would Absalom, his son, becoming king, restore unto Mephibosheth the kingdom of Saul? It doesn't make any sense. Mephibosheth didn't have any followers. He was the son of Jonathan. It doesn't add up. And so here is Ziba, who is acting like he's David's friend. He brings all this stuff. He brings him donkeys saddled with food, and oh, this is all for you. In other words, he's ingratiating himself into David's life. And what does he end up with? He ends up with all of Mephibosheth's stuff. That's why when someone comes to you and they start flattering you, you know, the first thing, you go into a church as a prospective pastor, and someone starts flattering you right off the bat, immediately the red flags begin to rise and the hackles rise on the back of my neck, and I'm thinking, what does this person want? If nothing else, they want to ingratiate themselves. It's not that you shouldn't be friendly. That's not what we're talking about. But it's that ingratiating attitude. You should be friendly, absolutely, and welcoming. But it goes beyond that. And he's over the top with it. Even David said, what does this mean? What's the cause of this, Ziba? Oh, Mephibosheth, he's rejected you as king, and he thinks he's going to be restored. Again, it turns out to be a lie. A little bit later, after Absalom is dead, they go back, and Mephibosheth comes and sees him. He said, he lied. He slandered me. And Ziba is supposedly Mephibosheth's friend, his servant, and David's friend. He's supposedly a very reliable, good man, but he isn't. He's a slanderer, and he was out for his own profit. Again, those are the type of friends you definitely don't want. Who wants a subtle friend that likes to throw a wrench in the works, or the social friend who will say something to your face? Or a slandering, ingratiating friend. And ultimately, it's all of the friendship there is a facade, and it's all just for their own profit, whatever that happens to be. And none of us want those kind of friends. I don't want that kind of friend, and I don't think anyone here would want that kind of friend. But then you read about Ittai and you read about Hushai, and those are the kind of friends we want. And not only are they the kind of friends that we want, those are the type of friends that we need to be. I read Ittai, and I know they were brothers in arms. Ittai there's no question he was a man. He was a soldier. He was proven. He was trusted. They'd fought battles together. I understand all that. But I'm sure there were others who deserted David. But Ittai told him, and David even told him to go back, and Ittai said, I'm going to be where you are, whether you're alive or dead. You know, the Bible talks about a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And he was willing to stick by David no matter what. He was his friend. He wasn't there for profit. He wasn't there for pleasure. He was there because he loved David. And that's what true friendship is. He loved David. And Hushai, a little bit later, same thing. Verse 32 of our text, chapter 15. Now, here it is, verse 31. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai, the Archite, came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. He was asking, really, Hushai to take his life into his own hands. Absalom even questioned him. Obviously, it was of the Lord. But Hushai went back, and he did exactly what David wanted to do. Ahithophel wanted to go out and kill David right away, and Hushai said, no, 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 no. And they asked him specifically, Hushai said, he's like a lion that's been wounded, and he's a man of war. And he was, this is all true. And the men that are with him are men of war. These are real men, mighty men. Give them a chance, right? Give us a chance to gather the whole army together. Now, that wasn't the right move at that point because David was on the run and he was broken. But Hushai took his own life into his hands by going back there. These men were true friends, true friends. And I've called them the steadfast friends. You've got the subtle friends, the social friends, the slandering friends, and then you have the steadfast friends. The real friends, the true friends. They're there for no other reason than because they love you. That's it. And they'll stick with you. Those are real friends. You know, people today, they talk about friends. You know, you can be on Facebook and how many friends you have on Facebook. I'm going to friend this and friend that. It's ignorant stuff. I mean, I don't understand it. Because real friends are hard to come by. They're hard to come by. And sometimes it's hard to be one, a real friend, a true friend. We have the best example of all. We have the very best friend. Over in John 15:13, it says, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend. And the Lord did just that. He is the greatest friend. And friend, of course, acts. Ittai acted. He went with David. He suffered with David. He was inconvenienced with David. He was willing to fight with David. And if it came to it, die with David. That's a true friend. Hushai went back for David, counseled against Ahithophel for David, was willing to die for David. Those are true friends. True friends. And the Lord, again, being the very best friend, died on the cross for us. He laid down his life for his friends. He laid down his life for his enemies. The greatest example of all. He showed his friendship by dying on the cross. And the very next verse after that, in John 15, verse 14, and Mark even alluded to this when he quoted 1 John, which fits right into the message. The Lord said to his disciples, ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. See, true friendship is action, right? True friendship is being there, is doing, is acting for your friends. It's not slandering them. It's not throwing a wrench in the work. It's not being jealous of them. Right? It's not just being a social friend. Those are the worst kind of friends. People that'll smile in your face, but there's a dagger in their eyes. No, the steadfast friend is what we want and what we want to be. What kind of friend are you? What kind of friend are you? You a steadfast friend? A steadfast friend. Someone who is willing to do and act on behalf of the good of others that are your friends, whom you love, so much so that you're willing to lay down your life, if it came to that, for their sake. The Lord wasn't just speaking empty words. He was speaking truth. And he showed what he was by what he did. True friends set aside themselves. They set aside who they are and what they want for others. They're selfless. Whereas these other friends were all about self. It was all about them, what they wanted, what they desired. And they were willing to engineer the circumstances to get what they wanted to get. And that's not what true friends do. And the Lord unconditionally laid down his life and bore our sins in his own body on the tree, which is the greatest, most wonderful gift of friendship that anyone could give. And we're to emulate him. So whether you have any friends like that, you need to be a friend like that. That's the type of person that you should aspire to be.